In this week's video, I'll be showing you how to do these mid-century modern geometric inspired polygel nails. I'll be showing you how to do these step by step, including prep, application, shaping, and nail art. So let's jump right into nail prep. I'm taking a cuticle pusher and pushing back the cuticle very gently. Do this on all 5 nails, and if your nails are not lasting, especially your polygel nails, it can usually be traced back to your nail prep, so really take your time with this. You can also use an e-file to help clean up that area even more. I'm using a micro taper bit here at a very low speed. And I always finish off with a fine grit sanding band. This really helps pull everything together, just running that over the cuticle area and the surface of the nail to make sure that surface is really as thoroughly as clean as possible. And we are going to be doing square nails today, so I'm using the XXL square tips from nailzbydev, just giving you a little bit of a preview of what they look like. And before we apply any tips, we're going to dehydrate and cleanse the entire nail. This is also really important. Making sure you have a really dehydrated nail surface free of any oils is really going to help your retention as well. If I'm going to be applying polygel over nail tips, I'm always going to use a brush on glue. So I'm just putting a drop of that in the center and placing it on the nail for about 10 seconds. That usually does the trick. And then I like to use this little magnet hack to trim down the nails to whatever length I'd like. Basically just match up the magnets to whatever length you're cutting down the nails to. And then we take that same fine grit sanding band and remove the shine from the nail tips. This is going to help rough up the surface and kind of give an anchor for the polygel to stick to. Doing this at about 5 RPMs, also using this to just make sure that the nail tip is flush with the natural nail, but just be careful of any overfiling, and then you can remove any dust with a manicure brush. I would definitely recommend using a primer. Young Nails Protein Bond is very popular, and for good reason. It really helps your retention as well, so if you haven't tried it out, would definitely recommend that. Just let that air dry, and then you'll want to apply a gel base coat of your choice. Apply a nice even layer to the entire nail and fully cure that, and do not wipe off the sticky layer. You want to make sure that that base coat layer remains sticky. It's going to create an anchor for your polygel to stick to as well. Polygel is a hybrid gel, so this is a really important part of that system, is making sure that you use a gel base coat. And we are moving right along. I'm just getting my 70% isopropyl alcohol ready in a dappen dish, and we are moving on to application. So I wanted to do a different color on each nail. Just thought it would be fun for spring, summer nails. So I'm using this bubblegum pink color on the thumb, really focusing on applying one bead at a time and fully curing that before I move on to the next one. And with polygel, it's really about that patting motion. You want to just pat the product into place and then drag it down the rest of the nail as needed. Because polygel / hybrid gel doesn't cure until you put it into a lamp, you really have unlimited time to perfect this to your liking before you cure it and it dries. And it has almost a Play-Doh toothpaste-like consistency, so it's pretty fun to do application in my opinion. I know it can be really frustrating at first when you're getting the hang of it, but once you do, it can actually be really fun because you're really just molding that product into place, making sure that it fits the nail tip, like almost like a puzzle piece or a foundation. You're really just trying to make sure that that product matches it as closely as possible. And if you are a beginner, I would recommend working in multiple beads. I would recommend that in general, just because that's the best way to make sure that your polygel is fully curing. This is a pretty thick product, so you do want to make sure that you're fully curing it and everything is nice and dry before you move on. Working in smaller beads, and by that I mean like anything more than one big blob of polygel, is really going to help you as a beginner. It'll give you more control over the product, and it'll allow you to gradually build up the polygel on the nail versus having to apply everything all at once, which can be really overwhelming. Like I typically start with one bead near the free edge-ish, work on getting that into place, and then I'll fully cure that, and then I'll do like another bead or two, just depending. And that usually does the trick. I don't normally do nails any longer than this, but the longer that you do your nails, the more polygel you'll need, and vice versa. I will also periodically dip my brush in the liquid, drain a little bit of that out. You don't want to have your brush flooded with liquid and then use that to mold the polygel. That's really what the slip solution is for. It helps the polygel be less sticky and help you move it around and shape it to fit the nail. And for the cuticle area, I always recommend placing it below the cuticle and then using the edges of your brush to tuck it in and being more mindful of the liquid amount that you're using for the cuticle area especially. It's a lot more easier and more prone to flooding. Once everything is fully dry, you're gonna notice there's a sticky layer on top of the polygel, which is normal. So you just wanna remove that with some Young Nail Swipe or some alcohol and a lint-free wipe, and that should do the trick. Now let's move on to step 3. Prep and application is done. So now we are moving on to shaping. So I use a Young Nails dust collector. Any dust collector would work. A Melody Susie e-file, safety glasses, and an N95 mask. And then we're gonna start off with the 5-in-1 Pana bit. So we're just gonna use that to clean up the cuticle area. As you guys know, this is the first step that I always do. This is typically what people usually do last, but I have just integrated this as part of my routine and I have pretty much stuck to it. The reason that it's really great is it really helps you kind of clean up the area that I'm pointing to here. The goal in this area is just to make it as flush as possible where it is right next to the cuticle, and then you want kind of a gradual arch going down the nail, so that's going to be your apex. So you just want to kind of build this gradual arch. You don't need anything too dramatic. You don't also want it to be too flat. But anyways, this bit really helps carve that out and really refine that shape if it wasn't so perfect during your application. So as you kind of work your way around the cuticle area, as I was pointing to there, you will gradually see that apex kind of come to life if it wasn't so visible before. So again, this is the 5-in-1 bit, and these are really popular for their tapered kind of cone shapes. They're really good for getting into the cuticle area especially. I use a fine grit drill bit for this one, for the 5-in-1 bit, and I use it at about 5 RPM, so I keep it pretty light. I don't need anything too rough in that specific area. When I need something coarse, this is where this bit comes in. This is the round Pana bit. And if you've seen my other shaping videos, you know that this is also an important part of my shaping routine. So I use this to debulk the entire nail. I like to run it over the entire surface of the nail, and I do it at a pretty high speed, about between 7 to 10 RPMs, but I definitely worked my way up to that because it is pretty coarse. So it's really good for removing any excess product and helping smooth out any areas that may be uneven. You can also use it around the cuticle area, just very lightly. I mean, I'm not necessarily using it to seal the cuticle, but it can help further smooth out that apex area as needed. I really focus on trying to make sure that transition from the edge of my cuticle to the apex is as gradual and as even as possible. That's really helped me kind of achieve the look that I was going for with my nails. This bit is also really good for cleaning under the nail, and you can also use it to help make a C curved shape under the nail, or just remove any product in that area if it feels like it's too thick or anything like that. The last step for shaping is going to be hand filing. I like to use an 80/80 grit hand file. I just like to season the edges with another file before I go in, just to make sure that the edges are not too sharp. And the first thing that I like to do is go under the surface of the nail to remove any product that may be hanging under there. It's not uncommon for some polygel to get under the sidewalls or extend over the sides. It happens to everyone, it happens to me. But using this motion and the hand file will help easily remove that. When you do this though, you don't want to be filing in at an angle like I'm showing here. You want to keep it as pretty much straight as possible. I mean, it is going to angle a little bit, but the big thing here is you don't want to put a ton of pressure just going at one sharp angle, because then you're going to put a notch in your nail. So just be a little bit mindful. I like to shape, take a look how things are looking, go back in more if I need to. You don't need as much pressure as you think even for this step. So you just want to try to maintain contact as evenly as possible, and it'll remove a lot more than you think. Like, look at this big chunk that came off just from filing under the nail. Then I like to file against the sidewalls. This is just to kind of help make sure that the square shape is as square and as straight as possible. So again, trying to keep my file as straight as I can. Again, there might be a little bit of angling, but more or less, you know, you're just trying to keep that file straight and maintain contact with the sidewall. And then I do run the file over the surface of the nail. And so once I see that kind of white, dusty, chalky looking pattern after I've filed over the entire surface, that'll kind of indicate to me that I've made contact with my file and the entire surface of the nail, and that should kind of help smooth and even things over. So once you kind of see that patchy pattern over the entire surface, you know you've hit like all the points on the nail. And that's a good indicator to me that I pretty much filed the surface of the nail as much as I need to. If there are areas that are really bulky, you can definitely file those areas more. Just keep in mind that, again, this is a pretty coarse file, so you probably need less than you think. And then the free edge is always the last part. This is just to help square things off, make sure that the corners are nice and sharp. I like my square to be very square, so whatever you prefer for the free edge, this is a good time to just clean up that area. So let's move on to the next nail, again starting under the nail. The other thing you want to be mindful is don't file too into that corner. If you remove too much of that corner, especially if you're doing square nails, it's going to ruin that square shape. It's going to look a little wonky. This is something that I've had to learn the hard way and still have to be mindful of. But that kind of curve, those two curved points that are underneath, are really important to help maintain that square look. So I try to be cautious of not, honestly, I don't even try to touch it very much at all, which is, you'll see kind of the technique that I'm using here. If I do, I try to keep it pretty minimal. And then yeah, just moving on to filing against the sidewalls and repeating the same pattern that we did for the thumb. When I file the free edge here, you'll see that I'm pulling away because it's really easy to again, file into that corner and everything kind of turns out uneven. So I like to pull away when I'm filing on the free edge, if that makes sense. Hopefully that visually translated in terms of what I'm showing in the video, but these are just like little tips and tricks I've learned to help my square nails look a little bit more square than they used to when I first started. So we're just removing all that dust again with some Young Nail Swipe, and now we are moving on to nail art. We're gonna use some neon jelly colors today. These are from South Texas Nail Supply. These are some pretty stunning colors for spring and summer, so highly recommend them. I had a lot of fun playing with these for this set. I'm just applying that pink jelly color over the pointer finger, and then we're also gonna use it on the pinky. This just added a little nice layer of like a neon base before we go in and do our nail art. I'm also going to use the neon yellow. This is all from her Neon Oasis collection that just came out. Has some pretty stunning colors in it. Really fun colors for spring and summer, so would definitely recommend it. I've been having a lot of fun using these. So I'm also using the neon yellow on the middle finger, and we're gonna use that on the thumb as well. You'll see that it kind of gives you a different effect depending on the base, so it looks a little bit more orange on the thumb. So I had a lot of fun just kind of experimenting with the different bases, and this is a lot of gel polish, so it can kind of make your nail start looking a little bit thick, so I just like to wipe under the nail to remove any excess that may be under there. So for the nail art, I've placed some of those same colors on this nail art palette. We're gonna be using another couple colors as well, like a pink and orange, black and white. This is the general inspo for today, like mid-century modern, geometric shapes kind of nail art. So I started off with doing like 3 circles on the thumb. I'm just outlining it with pink. And once I've got the outline for the circles in, I'm gonna go in and basically fill in the rest of the area around the circles in pink. It can be a little tricky just like drawing all 3 circles at once. So what I did was I drew this first circle, I outlined, or I mean filled in the color around it a little bit, and I cured that, and then I moved on to the rest. That's kind of the nice thing about flash curing in between, is you can kind of make sure that one part that you've finished stays in place and it doesn't get messed up as you're trying to draw on the rest of the nail. So the last thing I did for this design on this finger was just outline those circles with a black gel polish. For the next nail, we're gonna take some of that orange gel polish, and I'm gonna apologize in advance. I think the colors were so bright that it just didn't show up as well in the camera as I wanted to. I also have like a new light that I'm testing out, but I'm basically just drawing that boomerang mid-century modern design, outlining that with some gel polish. As you can see, it's basically kind of a U shape with some more exaggerated kind of curved lines, and a little bit skinnier in some ways, but it's basically that boomerang shape that I was showing in the photo. So I just outlined that in gel polish, drew one in orange, and then kind of did the reverse in yellow, and then fully cured that. Now I'm using a dotting tool and some white gel polish to draw the little kind kind of flower star-ish design. I would recommend keeping the white gel uncured and then drag your brush through it. That'll help it look a lot more clean. If you cure it and then try to draw it, it's not gonna look as cohesive. It'll look like it's like separate pieces versus one. And then I drew another one of those little stars near the yellow boomerang, and that was all for that nail. Now we're doing some swirly lines. This was super fun and pretty simple, honestly. You're just gonna take your liner brush and start drawing some abstract lines. These don't have to be any certain patterns. I was just trying to make them as curvy as possible. I also wanted to make sure that it wasn't just like the yellow getting covered up, so I left some of that space unpainted just so the yellow would show up as well and be part of that design. And the last color I'm gonna add in is some pink, so I'm just gonna draw that in right next to the orange, just kind of generally following that general outline of the swirl that I drew in orange, and then we're gonna go ahead and draw some swirls going the other way. I had like a really interesting thought like while I was drawing this design, which like after doing nails for a couple years is a more simple design for me to do, but I remember like 2 years ago like really struggling to do like this orange swirl design that I wanted to do, and I just like couldn't get my brush to move like in the way that I wanted to, and it was taking me forever. So all that to say, like, you think you don't improve, and then one day you're drawing like the same thing that you were struggling to do like not that long ago, and it's like so much easier. For the next finger, we're gonna do the kind of rounded square shapes that I showed in one of the photos. A lot of this is also just like geometric shapes that I'm doing in different colors. So, you know, like any like geometric shape or any abstract shape you want to do would work really well for this design as well. So I again apologize for the lighting. I guess the colors were just so bright, like my camera and light did not like that, or maybe it's the light that I'm using now. I feel like I'm constantly like new light, new tripod, and still trying to figure out what works, but I think you can still generally see what I'm doing here. But after I drew in kind of those rounded squares, I just added a mini version in white gel polish on top of that. And then just adding some line work here. I would recommend doing this in a gel paint. I made the mistake of doing this with a gel polish, or maybe my hand just wasn't as steady that day, but it didn't turn out as well as I would have liked it to. But I think this is a really nice effect that you can add to this nail set as well. And for the pinky, we're just gonna draw a really large diamond with the star in the center. Again, I apologize for the overexposed light, but basically just drawing this giant diamond, 2 triangles basically connected, and then for the star, just a dot in the center, and then using my liner brush to just lightly drag out those corners. And then just went ahead and top coated that. This is the final look. A lot of bright colors, a lot of neon. This is super different from any set that I did, so I hope you enjoyed. I do post weekly polygel tutorials and nail tutorials, so I hope you will follow along, and I will see you in my next video.